Cracking book here that I've just finished, How to Cook Your Life. I don't think you really finish these books. I'll come back to it. A really fine book. It's one of the fascicles, one of the articles from one of the chapters from this book here, Master Dogen's Shobo Genzo. He would have been a character around about the time of Thomas Aquinas, and could we argue he's the Thomas Aquinas of the Soto Zen world to an extent, definitely. He's their great kind of theologian, not to trip over words. How to cook your life then. This is instructions that Dogen gave to the head cook in the monastery. And what's really fine about this book is it kind of is saying, look, here's instructions on how to find the extraordinary in the ordinary. Here is a way to, you're cooking for the monastery, but you're cooking yourself in the process. There's a Dogen is such a poet, which can make him hard to understand because he's a great philosopher as well. And that's the beauty of the likes of Kosho Uchiyama, commentary that goes bit by bit to really break it open for us. Not just in a scholarly way, but far more in a living way, from a Zen master, as opposed to a theoretician who's kind of locked into just splitting hairs over language. But there's a section in here where Dogen's saying, treat the pots like your own head, like your own body parts. Everything you're doing is sacred. It talks of, measuring the grains so that nothing's lost. Being able to have that calculating mind, living in the present moment still, but at the same time having that wherewithal to plan for the next day. How much will I need? The monasteries were big back in Dogen's day. Thousands, up to thousands of people they were cooking for on a daily basis. And it's important, for them, just as now, that they didn't waste a whole pile of food and that they made the right amount. So that's tackled. And Kosho Uchiyama brings it into application for ourselves, this balance between, stillness and detachment and peace and silence to service practicality, planning in our lives. This book definitely looks at the concept of a wholehearted way of throwing oneself completely in to what we do, as opposed to kind of the half-arsed approach, which I find as I get older, it's just so much easier, so much harder, I should say, to be wholehearted about what I do. Because I find I can't be if I'm being honest, I can't be 100% all in about the Catholic Church anymore. I just can't. I know too much about it. Now, there's things I respect about it, and I would still, more or less go along. Yeah, I'm a Catholic. Yeah, I go to the Mass with my wife, and it's all very dandy. It provides, lovely places here in Ireland where I can sit, meditate, and pray. There's so many great authors within the Catholic tradition. They do some good around the world and locally. And it's a decent enough community to be a part of. It's still here in Kerry what so many people do. But one gets the impression it's not a wholehearted way for so many of us, including the priests today, unfortunately. But I think deep down we need a wholehearted way. I can no longer be a monk. I'm not a monk. I'm married and I'm in the world and I have a day job. And although a few times in my married life, more than a few times, I felt like heading back to the monastery, and in one way or other, Orthodoxy kind of held that out as an option for me at one point. That's not something I'm going to do. It's not something I would even want to do. What I'd rather do is find my wholehearted way in this life, in the very life that the universe has given me. God is not over there in Athos. God is not over there in Rome any more than he's right here and right now. This is something that Dogen had to wrestle with his own vocabulary in his own way. If enlightenment is the universe, if everything is already has Buddha nature, as he would put it, then why do anything? Why do we have to work? And he explores that more in another book that I'm started working through, the Genjo Koan. By, it's the fan in the air. There's a story of a student that approaches an old monk. He was fanning himself in the Japanese heat of the sun, and he says, "Look, why are you fanning yourself? The air is everywhere." Don't you know that, master? And the master just continues to fan himself, and basically comes to the end of this kind of koan of saying, "Look, even though the air is everywhere, you still have to move in it. You still have to actualize it, even though life is all there is. Even though there's that sense of like everything I meet is I. The universe itself is I. Everything I come in contact with is the self, in a sense. Because where does myself, my small ego begin and end? And even though that is the case, we still have to actualize our life in the living of it. We all have something to do. And this has been a beautiful read to remind me of that, and to really approach my teaching job as service, like the head cook, to go in and do the business, serve the people as I'm serving myself, to serve them as myself, to treat them as myself, to love neighbor as thyself, because ultimately we are all in the same boat. The one planet, the one pebble in space, as it were. Now, there's an awful lot that comes up in this as he's given instruction. Everything is your life. That's beautiful. I really enjoyed that. I'm still working through the consequences of that. On one sense, he says, you can't even share a fart with somebody. Your life is your life, But in another sense, the interconnection of being is everywhere. That everything we encounter is actually self, is the great self beyond the ego's fabrication of permanent, distinct selves. He talks about 3 states of mind to approach the kitchen of life. Parental mind of like, okay, you've got a responsibility for what for who you're serving, for the people you're working with, for the things you're using. Treat them with respect. These beings that have been given to you to eat, to cook. Treat the pots and pans like your own head and heart, I think is what he says. And he talks about the value of practical work. Obviously, reading about life doesn't feed you. He talks about another state of mind. So parental mind is one, and then the other is mind like a mountain, being still, not being carried away. I used to work in kitchens, and you get the head chef was often a lunatic. break brushes in his anger, throw things out the window, shout and swear at people. And I like to just be the kitchen porter in the corner, just hide behind the machine and just crack on. But these are the passions of life, and the mind, like a mountain, is equanimous in the storm. It's not getting carried away, and that is practiced as we move through life in Zazen. But then everything that we do should be informed by that still place, beyond the machinations of the imagination and the false ego. And then what's the other state of mind? Oh, joy. He talks about approaching life, approaching our service, approaching what we do with joy. Thank God I'm not born as a caterpillar, that I don't have to dodge, crows today or starlings. Thank God that I'm born in the 21st or 20th century, living in the 21st century, in this age of technology. Thank God I have relative health. And all of these things one can be grateful for and suffuse one's life with the energy of joy. He talks about, living one's life wholeheartedly as opposed to half-heartedly. I think I've spoke about that already. Difficult to do today. Working with a clear vision. What am I doing, and why am I doing it? It's just a very, very good book. Very simple to read, and a good way of getting, the Zen wisdom into your particular walk. That the monastery of life is where it's really at. The monastery of your real daily life. I like it in the Zen tradition, actually. They have monks that are married, monks that do day jobs, as well as monks that go out and beg for food every day. So now, a little something from the book, just to give a little appetizer, as it were, if I can find it. So, Kosho Uchiyama's commentary. Both day and night, everything you encounter is your life. Because of that, we put our whole life into everything we encounter. Everything I'm doing. When I'm born, this is something that comes up in his other book, Opening the Hand of Thought. When I'm born, the whole universe, my universe, is born with me. When I die, the whole thing is finished, in a sense. That's not to be an egomaniac and say it's all about me, it's all my dream, you guys don't exist or whatever. But it is to say that in one sense, everything that we encounter is our life, is my life. It's not self and others, the divided self. That's dualistic thinking. And the mystics of every tradition get beyond that. On one hand, that's true. On one hand, yes, there is distinctions. There's Buddhas and non-Buddhas. There's saints and non-saints. There's holy and not holy. There's good and there's bad. There's my bank account and your not bank account. All of these things. Then in the conventional reality, but in the ultimate reality, everything I encounter is me, is my life. That has no beginning and no end. Because of that, we put our whole life into everything we encounter. Our life is what is being encountered, becoming one. Sorry, our life and what is being encountered become one. Often, we approach life as these people are a hassle, this job is beneath me, and poor old me and against the world. But this is not the way of the sages, of the wise. They see everything I do is me. Everything I see is a reflection of what's going on within. The dividing line between me and the other is tenuous in the extreme. I go to the ocean, and the ocean is reflected in my eyes. I'm shaped by the world around me, just as the head cook is shaped by the work that he's shaping and by the people, the staff that he's working with. How he treats them is ultimately shaping his own heart, shaping his own mind, shaping his universe. When we throw ourselves into our work, total service, there ceases to be a gap or duality between our life force and the thing or work that is being encountered. So that the opposing meaning of all the ordinary dualistic words, like our, life, force, on the one hand, and thing, work, on the other hand, these fall away and it all becomes one. What I do with my mind, with my heart, with my hands, is my world, shapes my reality. There is no distinction. How I treat and view this glass is how I treat and view myself. As I serve and pour myself out in my service to family, to colleagues, to students, to my workplace, to my Sangha or religious community, whatever it be, to my neighbors, how I treat them. I'm pouring myself out in receptive service, doing what needs to be done, not busybodying, but doing what is my duty to do. In each moment, there is the holy, there are the sacred robes, there is my priestly ministry, there is my monastery, and God descends. Kingdom of God is among you, is within you. It's not on Athos. It's not away there on the end of the horizon, some fantastic priest or monk that I've never met before. It's right here, right now. The ordinariness, which is actually the real extraordinary. Yeah.